Hello and welcome back to another FPL team selection video. This week we're looking ahead to game week 7, and of course we used our wildcard chip last week in game week 6, and as you can see on screen it was an absolute howler. We ended up with only 37 points and we have dropped pretty much a million places in rank, so we're now down to about 1.8 million in the world. But of course, everything that you can lose in a week you can try and gain it back, so that's what we're hoping for, because we have set our wild card up of course for multiple game weeks rather than just game week 6. But it was a shocking game week in game week 6. You can see how we got on screen. No double digit pointers. Obviously the likes of Palmer, McNeil, Johnson all did really well. We'll touch on that in a little minute. But for me, my highest point scorer was Mbeumo, followed by Semenyo, and then a 5-pointer from Porro. Now, obviously, we benched Morgan Rogers. He ended up with a 7-pointer, which was unfortunate. So, yeah, it's been a pretty difficult game week over the last few. A lot of our big hitters didn't really do well. Obviously Haaland picking up a 2-pointer against Newcastle as our captain wasn't ideal either. Chris Wood, expected him to do something, was pretty poor, similar with Calvert-Lewin. I think the one benefit we've got here is Alex Moreno, or Gamble, who's obviously on the bench, started and played 80 minutes, which is good going forward, knowing that I could probably start him rather than have to worry about him not playing. Everything else has been pretty poor. In terms of obviously last week's video, we're speaking about our wild card, and if you watch the entire video you'll see I had a little plan set out if Raya was going to be injured. Now obviously there was no news about what was really happening about him until the last minute. He obviously did play, but for me I did take him out, went for Flecken as you can see on screen. But this is the graphic that we used last week. Now it was basically if Raya's going to be injured that I'm going to move on 4 of my players and go for 4 different players, and that would be Flecken, Johnson, McNeil and Havertz instead of Diaz, Rogers and Calvert-Lewin. And you'll never guess what side I ended up picking. You can see the points on the screen. It was essentially a 23-point swing from what I did get and what I could have had. Obviously McNeil picking up 15 points, I would have likely benched him anyway, so it's not like it's probably a better thing that I didn't have him. But Johnson picking up 11 points, he looks as though he's getting transferred in quite a lot now, scored in the Europa League last night. Havertz obviously done well, coming up against Southampton this week. I think he could do well again. So yeah, it's very unfortunate the way things have worked out. The only transfer I did make out of these guys was going for Flecken instead of Raya, and gained myself a full extra point. But yeah, Johnson over Diaz was unfortunate. You know, going for Calvert-Lewin over Havertz. Again, can't really be too upset about McNeil because he likely would have been benched anyway. So this week then, of course, it's going to be a similar team. We have 2 transfers in the bank now. This week we're looking at playing Trent, Gabriel and Porro. So it looks as though for me Lewis is going to take the bench again this week. It is a little bit of a transfer, I don't know, a bench dilemma. I will again look at that when we've got the full team on screen. But this week it's looking like Trent, Gabriel and Porro. Porro's just really attacking that I don't really see myself benching him anytime soon, so I think he can really get attacking returns against anyone. And obviously the amount of goals that Brighton conceded against Chelsea, Porro can obviously do quite well there. Gabriel, I'm expecting him to make up for last week conceding 2 against Leicester and getting a 1-pointer. I think he could easily get a clean sheet again. Trent, of course, playing against Palace, hoping that he can do well. And then obviously Flecken in goals, playing against bottom of the league Wolves, who haven't yet won a game, hoping that their defence can improve and he can keep up a nice clean sheet. Of course, Alex Moreno once again takes the bench, but of course he's going to be a decent option going forward if Forest do have a nice game. Obviously Chelsea away, I'm going to be very unlikely to be picking him. Now we've got all 5 midfielders on the pitch this week. We have Saka, Luis Diaz, Mbeumo, Semenyo and Rogers who are starting this week as well. Everyone with pretty nice fixtures. Saka against Southampton could do really well. Diaz against Palace. Home game for Mbeumo against Wolves. Hopefully he can score again in the first 30 seconds. And then obviously it's Semenyo against Leicester, expecting him to do quite well. Now Rogers is the one, again with Lewis, we'll look at it in a little minute, who I am debating on benching. But he's done well in the last couple of game weeks. You know, I think he scored last week and then he got 2 assists the week before. So Man United haven't looked great defensively. They just conceded 3 goals to Porto last night as well. So expecting Rodgers to hopefully do quite well. And then in attack, we have Haaland, Wood, and then Calvert-Lewin is going to be taking the bench this week. We've got the captaincy on Haaland. Again, if you want to know why, make sure to check out the captaincy video from yesterday. But yeah, Calvert-Lewin takes the bench against Newcastle, who looked pretty solid against Man City last week. So not really expecting Everton to get too much out of that game. Obviously, we've got Calvert-Lewin for the long term, Ipswich in the week after that. Now, obviously, we have the dilemma of who to bench of these players. So obviously, Rodgers is in the team now. These are the three players that I was potentially looking at, obviously taking up the two bench spots that we have remaining. So we've got Lewis, we've got Rodgers, we've got Calvert-Lewin. Now, took a lot of the stats from Fantasy Football Hub. In terms of chances of returning in game week 7, Lewis does take the number one spot pretty highly as well with 58%, and then Rodgers and Calvert-Lewin down at 46 and 47%. Now, obviously Rodgers is the one in the squad right now purely because I'm concerned about Rico Lewis's minutes. I believe he played the full match in the Champions League, or at least close to the full match, so I'm not really too sure on whether he starts at the weekend or not. If we can get some confirmation at that point, I'd be more inclined to start him over Rodgers. For me, I think Calvert-Lewin is just someone I'm not really too worried about playing this week against Newcastle. You can see Everton are only expected to score 1.4 goals. That's according to 11ify at the weekend against Newcastle. And Newcastle have slightly improved defensively as well, up to 9th for expected goals conceded. Now, obviously, they are conceding still a lot of chances down the middle of the park, so there is a potential that Calvert-Lewin could at least do something. Rodgers, however, playing against Man United, who are 4th for XGC, so they're looking really, really poor now. We've mentioned it already. Villa expected to score essentially 2 goals, 1.93 there, and United are conceding as well a lot of chances down the middle. And obviously, as we mentioned already, Rodgers is in some pretty decent form, so I do think he could do well this week. I do think I prefer Rico Lewis to Rodgers if we can guarantee that Lewis is going to play. So I'm going to wait and see what happens with leaks. Potentially we'll start Lewis, potentially we'll go for Rodgers if nothing really comes out. I think as of right now I'm going for Rodgers because I don't think there's a high chance that Lewis starts. Maybe potentially like a Stones could start in there, or even Walker in at right back. So obviously we're rolling the transfer this week. There's no moves being made. It's the week right after the wild card. I'd be pretty worried if I was going to be making 1 or 2 transfers this week after essentially making a full team of transfers. So the reasoning for this, obviously we've set our wild card up for the long term. A couple of players we've got in for the short term. So a couple of players I've got my eye on taking out is going to be Luis Diaz and Semenyo, 2 players who from game week 8 have some pretty difficult fixtures. So by game week 8, by the time next week comes around, we're going to have 3 free transfers to use, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be taking out Diaz and Semenyo. Who for yet? I'm not really too sure. It depends kind of how budgets are looking. I would like to do maybe McNeil, Johnson. I'd like to get Solanke in as well, but depends on who of my 3 strikers I'm going to take out, because I don't really want to take any of them out. Calvert-Lewin obviously with Ipswich in game week 8 as well, but these guys are coming into a run of difficult fixtures, so Diaz is probably going to come out, and then Semenyo. But obviously we've got a lot of rotation available. You know, I've got 3 bench players who all start and could all do well, so I could always just bench these guys for game week 8, maybe move myself up to 4 transfers in game week 9, and then do like a mini wild card and take a couple of the players out. I don't really know. A couple more days of planning next week, and we'll probably have a final decision on that. But Diaz and Semenyo are more than likely not going to be in the team, at least in the starting 11 from game week 8 onwards. But that's essentially how we're looking for game week 7 now. Again, like I said, a lot of good fixtures in there. I'm hoping Wood can do something against Chelsea, despite it being an away fixture. Obviously, Rodgers against Man United. Probably the 2 fixtures you would think could maybe not go so well, but they're not exactly fantastic defences, mainly Man United, with it being a home game for Rodgers. So I'm going to wait and see what happens with Lewis's minutes. If we can get a leak before the deadline, then Lewis will probably come in for Rodgers. But that's how the team's looking. Let me know what you think of it down in the comments section. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you are new. And if you're looking for more Game Week 7 content, make sure to click one of these 2 videos on the screen now. And I'll see you all in the next one.